Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have a very special guest. We have Jason Abrams joining us. He's the VP of Revenue at Plenful, a really interesting AI startup that's been catching fire these days. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Ross. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all things execution excellence, we're going to be talking about sales process, hiring, feedback channels, all that good stuff. But just so the audience gets to know you a bit, curious to hear about your background and how you got into revenue leadership in the first place.
Yeah, totally. I'll try and give a bit of an abbreviated version. I was in tech sales my whole career and wound up having a stint at LinkedIn for about 7 years. That's actually the company that brought me out to the West Coast, where I'm based now. And then from there, I had an opportunity to jump over to healthcare, to Lyra Health, which is a mental health company. At the time when I joined, they were Series B going on to Series C and had 100 employees. And after about 2.5 years there, we were on our Series F extension and had over 1,000 employees. So
Wow.
got to experience that journey of just hyperscale, building process, hiring out teams, really just moving as fast as possible. And then from there, I had a couple of other stops in healthcare, but I really missed technology. I missed being able to talk to technologists, being on the cutting edge of innovation in technology. So
Mhm.
that's why I joined Plenful. We are healthcare tech, but we're a technology platform for healthcare. So we're AI for back office operations and healthcare, whether it be health systems or pharmaceutical companies or insurance companies, helping them to automate manual workflows. It's been really exciting. We're hyper growth here. We're growing insanely fast, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Awesome. Awesome. What has been the biggest challenge going from, you mentioned LinkedIn, long stint there, a few health tech startups, and then now Plenful. What's been the biggest challenges you've gone up in the organization, taking on more responsibility and more ownership, especially, that number doesn't get smaller, it gets more responsibility, but also your ownership over, not just having a quota gets further and further, right? So what's been the biggest challenge as responsibility goes up, but kind of ownership over that exact number feels like it kind of goes down a little bit?
Yeah, I think that the biggest transition, more if I zoom out to like 40,000 foot view, I think the biggest transition, especially if you're a people leader that is a people leader oriented around service leadership or servant leadership,
Hmm.
you're deeply in it with your people, you care about them, you have their
Yeah.
backs, and you're always thinking about what's best for them. And as you zoom out and you start to move up into, more senior layers within an organization, it really becomes about what's best for the business. And I think you still
Yes.
have to balance what's best for the people too. And that's a part of the equation because what's best for the people oftentimes is best for the business, but sometimes not. So I think that as you get further removed from the field and you're layered out a bit, starting to think bigger picture and about what's best for the business and balancing what is good for your people and finding an equilibrium between those two concepts. Earlier in your career, when you're a frontline sales leader, it's just like, I got my reps back, what's best for them. And I think that as you progress, you got to zoom out.
That's a really good point. And our CTO, Wayne, puts this as your first team. Who's your first team? And that changes, right? The more senior you get.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, there is that tension between the business and the people always. That's one of it's funny you mentioned that. It's one of the hardest things that I found going from being a seller and frontline manager to now CEO of Accord is um, it feels almost unnatural a lot of times, maybe because we spent so much time doing that, or maybe just from being a seller and you're thinking about the people side all the time. Um, yeah, it takes a while to adjust to for sure.
Yeah. But I think coming from where we came from, whether being a seller or a frontline leader, it gives you good perspective on what impact decisions that you make that are best for the business will have on the people. And then in turn, what impact that will have on the business, right? Because these things are correlated. And if you're making decisions that are best for the business, but ignoring what's best for the people, that fundamentally will be not what is best for the business, right?
That's a good point. I think that's some of the most frustrating decisions I've been a part of as an employee have been where it feels like the person making the decision has no insight into the day to day. And that's why I think a lot of the leaders do come up doing the job. It's not a requirement, but most of the time you're like, oh, they get it. The way that they explained it or how this decision's getting made feels like it takes into account what it's like on the field. Whereas sometimes a lot of people from that pure consulting background or totally different, you know, maybe you're a VP of sales now, but you came from like ops or finance. Like it's very hard, I think, to have that empathy for what it's like to, have the majority of your paycheck to come from closing deals.
Yeah. And that's another thing is like, just it's off topic. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I think a lot of times people think department by department, some of these different concepts apply uniformly.
Yes.
And sales is just different. And
It
like,
just
look,
breaks all of the, yeah, all of the
different.
molds for sure.
Yeah. And I think you just need to understand that and have that that mentality in the decision making.
Totally, totally. Well, good transition from kind of how you made your way into here as a revenue leader and some of those learnings to the importance of number one, which is sales process standardization and execution. Obviously, that's kind of how we connected in the first place. So curious to get your take on why, if you had, the list of decisions, why that closely correlates to execution excellence, the need for standardization.
Yeah, I think when you come to a company, and it depends where they are in their journey, right? This could be tweaks, or it could be a fundamental rethinking, or it could be 0 to 1, creating it from the ground up.
Mhm.
But how you sell to your ICP, what that looks like, optimizing it for your ICP, standardizing it, getting it documented, and scaling it across a very quickly growing team so that people can adopt it quickly and ramp quickly. This is the most important thing I think you can do at a fast growth startup. I think that there's things that are sub bullets of that to make sure you're getting it right.
Yeah.
But at a high level, if you're not aligning your sales process to what is a best case for closing deals as quickly as possible within your ICP, then nothing else really matters. Because if you're not scaling revenue quickly and you're not making the right decisions in how you get those deals closed,
Mhm.
then you're going to really struggle to meet all of the other demands that exist internally. So I think, I'll give you an example, right? So when I joined Plenful, they had very much just emerged from product market fit exploration and finding that. And when I joined, things were starting to catch fire, right?
Mhm.
So what worked to get you there doesn't necessarily work to get you to the next place you're going, right? From A to
Yes.
B, B to C. So what had been working up to that point was really like throwing spaghetti against the wall, finding ways to work with accounts any way possible, finding ways to build with accounts.
Yeah.
A lot of those revenue practices are just not scalable once you found something that works.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I really leaned into, like in my first month, was what is a best sales process that we can align to here? What are our buyers seeking that they're not getting in the sales process currently? What does it feel like we're hearing from them is missing to help them have a light bulb moment and move forward with us?
Yeah.
How can we get that in there, document it, make sure everybody's aligned to it, create assets that align to it for the salespeople, and then standardize it? So I think for me, and again, this was different at other companies I've been at based on their journey, but this is the
Yeah.
most important thing to get right up front.
Totally. Yeah. It reminds me of the saying, like what great looks like. If you don't have that, how can you join a team or be part of a team if you're just off like I'm going to figure it out myself? No, you want to have that coaching of like, hey, here's the best practice, make it your own, but here's what good looks like. It's very hard to scale out a team if you don't have that baseline or like standards of what great looks like. And also it reminds me too of the idea of expectation setting, right? Like in a sales process, people want to be guided. Yes, they want to do it their own way and everything's unique, but they want a path forward. And you need to do the same thing for your team if you want to, like you're saying, be successful outside of one or two or three sellers, going out and just making it happen, right?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, this is the challenge is if you don't do these things and don't do them well, you staff up, you hire a bunch of people, everybody's off doing their own thing, and then 6 months later you look and 75% of them haven't closed a deal yet, or wherever you are in that journey.
Yeah.
It's hard to identify where gaps are and what's not working if you don't have a standard approach and people haven't been trained on that. And also just from anecdotal experience, that's where you see far bigger drop-offs in performance. Because if there is a best way to do things, then everybody should be doing it that way with iterations based on their
Yes,
style. But
exactly.
if there's steps that they should be taking, everybody should be taking those steps.
Yeah. And there's a part of that too that I think isn't always talked about is the muscle of building that as a culture in the company. And if you do something for so long, that becomes the norm. It becomes really hard to change, right? So if, hey, we're used to just doing it all different ways, different places, blah, blah, like, yeah, we're winning, but you're not working on that muscle to be able to do that consistently. So maybe you spend a lot of time in that stage. Those people that were great that should be able to scale with the business and help support that standardization might fight it because now it's not part of the culture of the company. And I've seen that a lot of times where companies have breakout success, hire all these people, and then like a year later, they bring in an awesome senior leader who's trying to standardize and build process around it and support the rest of the team. And there's this like cultural resistance, like bacterial resistance to like, that's not how we do things here. So
Yeah.
that's
No,
I think part of
I
it as
agree.
well.
I don't want to, I won't name names, but other companies that I've been at previous to my time here, there's just been a lot of debt to dig out of. And
Yes.
that can be technology investments that were made poorly. It can be org structure debt where things are just all over the place. But a lot of times it's this, right? It's all these
Cultural,
bad
yeah.
habits that have been reinforced and almost like codified as like the way to
Yes.
do things, and they're not right for where you're going. And it's hard to unwind those things. And the change management is much more challenging when that's the situation.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, people that have been through that before and learned, I feel like do things right from the start, and other people are like, no, let's just continue to do it because we're winning. Um, totally. Well, maybe last question on the process and standardization stuff, maybe for people that are coming in and find themselves at a company that doesn't have a lot of well-documented process. What do you think would be like the number one or two assets or, standardization things that they could get a big win out of just from the jump?
Yeah. So I think that for us, and I'll give a healthcare specific answer just because I'm so deep
Yeah.
in it now. But for us, it was getting to a place where we could explain our ROI and get people to buy into the ROI. And then also from our customer business, having some proof points and having some things that we could display as
Yeah. Like stories. Yeah.
don't just take my word for it, right? But in healthcare, it's all about ROI. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense in healthcare. So, especially when it comes to like the back office stuff, maybe not as much on like the patient care aspect of it.
Yes.
On the back office aspect, you really need to prove that if they're going to make this investment, that there's going to be a return in excess of what they're spending on the investment. So that was something that when I first got here was really important, was that we start to think about how we talk about ROI, how we create assets so that we can showcase our ROI, how we start to have customer conversations to extract the ROI and define it so that we can have those tangible points to bring to our sales process. I think for different companies, it might be a different thing, but
Yeah.
I think you should find what is the crux of your deal. What is the thing you got to get right, the hill to die on, and
Yeah.
make sure you get that right in your sale. And for us, it was ROI, and that's really where I focused my time in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. And the sound bites and snippets from customers being successful. That's the simplest thing you can get down is, hey, how are we all telling the same story? And like having these three things to fall back on
Yeah.
in client calls. So love
And how
that.
do you talk about success with your customers, right? A lot of times things might be going well with them, but they might not have the rubric to think about what value you're delivering. And sometimes that's a part of
Totally.
your job is, hey, these are the couple of the KPIs that we think about as it pertains to the return on our investment.
Yes.
Let us help you think about that, measure it, do better at understanding how we're delivering that for you. Because sometimes they might just go, yeah, the reps love it. Cool. Like yeah, a Cord example, right?
Yeah,
In order to keep that investment going over year, you got to have more than that.
totally. Yeah. And I always find like having that conversation with them that they could picture having with their boss, right? Is like they might get it in theory and it'd be soft and fine because they can make the decision. But like as they think about making that investment and doubling down or making the first step with you guys, what's something that you give them that could be like, oh, I just talked to my boss about this, and bringing up that kind of conversation, I find really helps people lean in and adds a lot of energy to client conversations.
Yeah, such an important part of sales in general is not just thinking about what your buyer cares about, but thinking about what their boss cares about, what their boss's boss cares about, whether it's on the acquisition side or the customer side. It's just, it's a good point.
Totally. Well, shifting gears away from some of the process down to the foundation of hiring and people. I know that's a lot of what you're focused on these days as Plenful scales, you know, and also what we were just talking about in terms of, team, the first team versus your people. How do you think about hiring? And, why is this number two on your list of the most important things to get right?
Yeah, so I think there's one like reductive answer, and then there's one that's a bit maybe a bit more in depth. I think the reductive answer is that if you hire poorly, you're going to struggle, and if you hire well, even if you do other things wrong, you'll probably still be okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
it gives you a lot of mistakes to make, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. My when I was at LinkedIn, my first promotion was from AE, enterprise AE to BDR manager. And I'll never forget our chief operating officer used to do a session with all the new first time managers at the company. And he had this big slide that was like 85% of your job is hiring. You can be a great manager, the best manager on earth. And if you hire poorly, your team's going to be bad. And if you could be a completely mediocre manager, even a bad manager. And if you nail hiring, your team's going to probably be high performing. Uh,
Wow.
and again, this is reductive, but I just think it's the most important thing you can do. I think
Yeah.
it's table stakes. Now, I think to get more into the weeds on it, knowing your company and knowing the profile of AE that'll be successful at your company, whether it be stage or product or type of sale, I think that's also really important too. And I'll give an example here at Plenful. We're actually not really selling against competitors just yet. We're interested we're in this like first to market niche kind of category where there's some adjacent vendors in certain areas, but what we do, we're really selling against the status quo uh,
Mm.
of doing things the old way. And what really aligns to that is the challenger sale. And getting in and educating and delivering insights and getting people to think differently.
Yeah.
That's very different than maybe people that have sold in a different way, where it's an
Yeah.
established commoditized business, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
It's
think
between these three companies every time. And, anyone's bought all three before. And yeah,
that process is so different. I mean,
totally.
you know totally the same. And so I think that's understanding what they've been selling and how they've been selling it is super important because their skill set needs to align to what your sale looks like. And then the second thing I think is stage, right? If you're super early stage, like we are here at my current company, people need to be able to be a self-starter. They need to be almost entrepreneurial in how they approach
Yeah.
their territory, their book of business. There's not going to be a lot of structure. There's not going to be a lot of support. I mean, they'll have their frontline sales leader and there'll be, support in pockets, but it's not going to be built out like it was at LinkedIn, right? Where you walk in day one and you got all your stuff. You got your, there's 16 people helping you with different things. And by your first month, you know exactly what you're supposed to do, exactly how you're supposed to do it. And there's
Yeah.
no, there's guardrails on everything. So I just think understanding if people can handle that early stage dynamic is important too.
Totally. Yeah. I think I've definitely made that mistake in the past where like you assume people will approach the job like you do, and everyone, you know what I mean? Like that early manager mindset of like everyone will just see the world the way I see it. And so if I can be successful at a smaller company, so can everyone. And I think that was something a limited, belief that I had that's just not correct is you might have an amazing performer, but at different companies, different stages, different types of products and sales, their success can just be dramatically different. And that's where it comes down to like having that real intuition, right? Of like what was someone doing before and how do they talk about it and did they see the difference? Because I found a lot of times if you ask someone, everyone's going to say yes because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know in the different roles, and you kind of have to be the deciding factor on that, right?
Yep. And it's so crucial to fit. It's just if the sale is not a great fit for how they sell,
Yeah.
granted, maybe 2, 3 times out of 10, you can find someone that can flex out of that and like learn a new way. But that's
Totally.
a
Yeah.
while,
But on
probably.
average, if you're hiring 10 people, are you going to hire every single one of them? That's going to be a completely different thing. Or are you going to take a couple bets on people, but 8 out of 10 of them are going to be hopefully doing a similar job that they've done for the last, 5 or 10 years.
Totally. And I would even say that like industry expertise, I view this as slightly even more important than that. Like if you know
Mm,
the industry, that's obviously a leg up, but knowing how to sell something that's in this stage with these dynamics, I actually weigh that a little bit higher.
interesting. Yeah. I think a lot of people also, I think, have been downplaying the importance of these things that I see online. It's like I hired, a waiter or an actor. I'm not saying that those are bad places to come from, but like there's something also for finding a high performer who's already a high performer doing the job for a long time, being successful and continue to do better than just, all these, kind of aberration stories of, the 1% or 10% of the world that can flex into, very different industries or roles or stage companies, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a VP at a company early in my career that used to say, you can teach an elephant to tap dance, but how long will it take you? And I always like, and he would say that in reference to like making these bets on people that don't come pre-packaged with exactly what you need. Like, yes, at some point, maybe you can get them there, but how long is it going to take you? And do you have that much time to allow someone to ramp into something new versus someone that can hit the ground running day one?
Yeah. And the risk that you're taking, right? Is what stage is the company? How big is the business? Like what percentage of the company are you betting on that? It varies dramatically. And I think it's always, more inspiring to read that story on LinkedIn, the classic meme around like, I hired the taxi, the Uber driver, and they're the top performer. I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. Hopefully there's opportunities for people to do that. Is that when you're hiring two reps in 1 year that both need to hit goal in order to you to raise the next round and everyone have a job next year? Or does that make more sense as like starting as an SDR at Salesforce and can make twice as much the next year than be successful and hustle everyone? So like I think there's, like you're saying, there's context to all of these things.
Absolutely. The context is key, 100%.
Totally. Well, shifting gears to something much more tactical, but I think makes a ton of sense, especially as we're talking about developing new products um, and doubling down on product market fit, is the feedback between people on the field, sales and CS, back to people actually building the products. Curious to hear about your experience with that and why that's so important to revenue growth.
Yeah, and this is, I think, as companies get more advanced, I think these pipes get built, and it functions in an important way as well. But in the early stages, this is so important. I
It's
mean,
everything. Yeah.
it's everything, because you could have a big customer that's interested, that wants specific things, and in the early stages, you're going to go do that. You're not going to say no to that, and that connectivity between products is critical, because you need to have open communication about the timelines and what that entails and how it impacts other things on the roadmap. And there just needs to be such a tight-knit relationship between the go-to-market teams and the product building teams in the early stages. And
Mhm.
I view it as mission critical, because and the dynamic changes over time, right? Like now, as you progress and you get a little bit bigger, maybe every request isn't one that you take, but if it's one that pushes you in the right direction, then you do take it. If
Yeah.
it's one that creates scale in a certain area that you know you need anyway, then you do take it. So, but the understanding of these things will never be achieved without there being that constant communication, and having that be built into your cadences.
Yeah, I think I think about this stuff all the time, which is like, what's the competitive advantage for startups? Like, how do we beat people that have been building the same product with hundreds of engineers for the last decade? I think you do it through what you're talking about. It's the unique insights that you're going to get that they're never going to have a product or eng team understand the intricacies of a customer like you can as a sub 1,000 or sub 500 person organization. There's just too many layers when you get bigger. And the fact that you can have leadership across those teams, even directly in front of customers, I think is really, really impactful. So how do you
No,
guys do that? Do you have because even like, again, like you're talking about sales and CS to them, I'm like, I encourage our sales and CS team to like not just do the translating. Obviously, they do a great job of that, but like it's your job to pull those people in so they can really understand it. Because even the difference between a gong recording and them being live on a conversation, I find is exponentially different.
yeah, I mean, what's great about the way we've set things up at Plenful is that our customer success team, our customer team, so that includes technical implementation and customer success, they're deeply embedded with our product team, because we actually have a product that's data orchestration. So a lot of what we're doing is oriented around implementing customers that have very complex data environments, and
Mhm.
fundamentally and necessarily they're very ingrained with each other. I think it's been more of a proactive approach in sales, where we'll be churning out kind of the run rate deals that we're doing, and then there'll be a big one that'll come, and they'll have very specific requirements, they'll have very specific things that they need, and we have to be. I mean, those are calls and deal cycles where the team is in it from the beginning. Once we identify that that's where we are,
Yeah.
throughout the entire cycle. And I
Yeah.
think having a product team and an engineering team that's comfortable being in those conversations, being a part of those cycles, be having a seat at the table in the deals. That's actually been one of the things we've done. Because to similar to your point, we've got Gong, we've got ways to transcribe and listen to calls and do that kind of stuff. But there's no replacement for, you know what, this is a big enough deal where it's important enough. Everybody's involved. And I think
Yeah.
that you're early enough, that can be the dynamic if you want it to be.
And I think the customer cares about it. At the end of the day, people are making, I always think, emotional decisions and rationalizing it after. The way that you approach that deal with those specific people, and they're comparing that maybe to the three other conversations they're having, they're like, how does this make me feel? And then I'm going to kind of rationalize that after when they've kind of made that decision subconsciously, right?
Yeah, and I think it shows intentionality, right? Like
Yes.
if you're bringing the people, all of the people that need to be at the table to the table, the buyer believes that you're going to do what's right by them, that you're
Yes.
not going to overpromise, underdeliver, that you're not going to say that you'll be able to do that for them in 3 months and then not be able to do it. I think that there's trust in showing up as a unit for these engagements, especially when they're deals that are meaningful enough where that's going to help you.
Couldn't agree more. Well, yeah, it was fun jamming on all the stuff. I'm sure you got a million things going on. Sure this is helpful for other folks kind of, maybe going through this their first time, kind of bringing more structure and rigor and hiring out a team. But no, appreciate you taking a few out of your busy schedule to share this with the community.
Yeah, this is fun, Ross. I appreciate the invite.
Of course, of course. All right, take it easy, Jason.
Take care, Ross.